Welcome back to the Philosophy and Literature for Sleep, where we explore the greatest works of literature, one gentle page at a time. Tonight, we're settling into the warm embrace of perhaps the most celebrated writer in the English language. We're going to wander through the beautiful, complex world of William Shakespeare, letting his words wash over us like a familiar lullaby from centuries past. As always, I hope this journey through the bard's masterpieces helps you drift off peacefully, or at least provides a soothing escape from the day's worries by transporting you to Elizabethan England. There's always a small chance that Shakespeare's brilliant storytelling might be too captivating and keep you awake. But if that happens, well, at least you'll have spent time with some of the most beautiful language ever written. Before we lose ourselves in iambic pentameter and timeless tales, I'd love it if you gave this video a gentle like and perhaps subscribed if you haven't already. It truly helps this quiet little corner of YouTube grow. I'm also curious to know where you're listening from tonight. Are you tucked into bed in London at midnight, or perhaps listening from a cozy chair in Toronto at 9 p.m. while rain taps against your window? Let me know in the comments. It's always such a joy to see our sleepy literary community scattered peacefully across the globe. Now, get comfortable. Pull up your blankets. You don't need to analyze themes or remember plot points. You don't need to take notes or stay alert for a quiz. Just let Shakespeare's words flow over you like warm honey. And as we begin this gentle exploration of his works, remember this video is for educational and relaxation purposes only, and is not intended as a substitute for professional literary study or medical advice. Ready? Let's begin. Who was this man whose words still echo through theaters, classrooms, and quiet bedrooms 4 centuries later? William Shakespeare, born in the market town of Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564, emerged from relatively humble beginnings to become what many consider the greatest writer in the English language. But tonight, we're not here to dissect his biography or debate scholarly theories. We're here to let his stories cradle us into peaceful sleep. Shakespeare lived during what we now call the English Renaissance, a time when art, literature, and theater flourished like flowers in a well-tended garden. The world was expanding, new ideas were blooming, and language itself was growing richer and more flexible. Into this vibrant landscape stepped a young man with an extraordinary gift for capturing the full spectrum of human emotion in verse and prose. Picture London in the late 1500s. The Thames flows quietly past timber-framed buildings, and somewhere in Southwark, across the river from the city proper, stands a circular wooden theater called the Globe. Here, under an open sky, audiences from all walks of life gathered to watch plays that would transport them to ancient Rome, mystical forests, and royal courts. The air would have been filled with the scent of fresh rushes scattered on the floor, the murmur of excited voices, and perhaps the distant sound of church bells marking the hours. It was in this world that Shakespeare crafted his plays, weaving together stories that spoke to kings and commoners alike. His theater was not a quiet, reverent space like a modern library, but a lively, interactive experience where the audience might cheer, boo, or even throw things at the actors. And yet, from this boisterous environment emerged works of such profound beauty and insight that they continue to move us centuries later. Let's begin our journey through Shakespeare's works with perhaps his most famous tragedy, Hamlet. This is the story of a young Danish prince who finds himself caught between duty and doubt, action and contemplation. When the play opens, we meet Hamlet in the shadow of his father's recent death and his mother's hasty remarriage to his uncle Claudius. The castle of Elsinore feels heavy with secrets and unspoken grief. But then, on the castle's battlements during a cold, dark night, Hamlet encounters something that will change everything. The ghost of his father appears, pale and sorrowful, to reveal a terrible truth. He was not killed by a serpent's bite, as everyone believes, but murdered by his own brother Claudius, who poured poison into his ear while he slept in his garden. Now Hamlet faces an impossible burden. Should he believe this ghostly revelation? Should he seek revenge? How can he be certain of what he's been told? These questions torment him throughout the play, creating that famous hesitation that has captivated audiences for generations. To be or not to be, that is the question, he muses, standing alone on stage, wrestling with the weight of existence itself. The beauty of Hamlet lies not just in its plot, but in Shakespeare's ability to capture the texture of a troubled mind. Hamlet's soliloquies let us hear his thoughts as clearly as if we were listening to our own inner voice. He speaks of sleep as the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to, finding in rest a kind of peace that eludes him in his waking hours. As the play unfolds, we meet Ophelia, a young woman caught in the cross-currents of Hamlet's anguish and her father's political schemes. Her fate becomes one of the most heartbreaking elements of the story, as her mind fractures under the pressure of loss and confusion. When she appears later in the play, singing strange, beautiful songs and distributing flowers with mysterious meanings, Shakespeare shows us how grief can transform even the gentlest soul. The play builds toward a climactic sword fight between Hamlet and Laertes, Ophelia's brother, who seeks his own revenge. But by then, the stage is littered with the consequences of secrets, lies, and the human cost of political ambition. The Danish court, which began the play in celebration of a royal wedding, ends in tragedy and silence. From the brooding battlements of Elsinore, let us travel to the sun-drenched streets of Verona, where another of Shakespeare's most beloved stories unfolds. Romeo and Juliet tells the tale of two young lovers whose families have been locked in an ancient feud, their hatred so deep that no one remembers what originally caused it. Romeo Montague is introduced to us as a young man already lovesick, pining for a girl named Rosalind who doesn't return his affections. He wanders through Verona's streets like a melancholy poet, speaking in elaborate metaphors about unrequited love. But all of this changes in a single evening when he attends a masked ball at the house of his family's enemies, the Capulets. Across a crowded ballroom, Romeo's eyes fall upon Juliet Capulet, and in that moment, his previous infatuation vanishes like morning mist. Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight. For I ne'er saw true beauty till this night, he whispers, watching her dance. The language Shakespeare gives them when they first meet is like a shared sonnet, their words weaving together in perfect harmony. That night, after the party ends, Romeo cannot bear to go home. Instead, he climbs over the wall into the Capulet orchard and finds himself beneath Juliet's balcony. What follows is perhaps the most famous love scene in all of literature. Juliet appears at her window, not knowing Romeo is below, and begins to speak her thoughts aloud to the stars. "Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" she asks, not wondering where he is, but why he must be who he is, a Montague, her family's sworn enemy. "Deny thy father, and refuse thy name," she pleads with the night air, "or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet." Hidden in the shadows of her garden, Romeo listens to these words with growing wonder. When he finally reveals himself, they speak to each other with a tenderness that transforms the darkness around them. The night becomes a cocoon of whispered promises and shared dreams, a brief sanctuary from the hatred that surrounds their families. Their love story unfolds with the speed and intensity of a summer storm. Within days, they are secretly married by Friar Lawrence, a well-meaning priest who hopes their union might heal the ancient wound between their houses. But fate and family loyalty conspire against them. A street fight erupts, Romeo's best friend Mercutio is killed, and Romeo, in a moment of rage and grief, kills Juliet's cousin Tybalt. Suddenly, the young man who spoke so beautifully of love finds himself banished from Verona, separated from his new bride by the very violence their marriage was meant to end. The story accelerates toward its tragic conclusion, driven by miscommunication, bad timing, and the cruel ironies that seem to govern the lives of Shakespeare's young lovers. But even in tragedy, Shakespeare finds beauty. When Juliet takes the potion that will make her appear dead, avoiding an unwanted marriage, but hoping to reunite with Romeo, she speaks to the vial with a mixture of terror and determination. "Romeo, I come. This do I drink to thee," she says, and in those simple words we hear both her courage and her absolute devotion. The tomb scene that ends the play is heartbreaking in its near misses and cruel timing. Romeo, believing Juliet truly dead, drinks poison beside her sleeping form. Juliet awakens moments after his death, finds his still warm body, and chooses to join him rather than face a world without their love. Their deaths finally shock both families into recognizing the price of their hatred, and they agree to end their feud over the bodies of their children. From the passionate heat of Verona, let us journey to the Scottish Highlands, where ambition and guilt create a very different kind of tragedy in Macbeth. This is perhaps Shakespeare's darkest play, set in a world where the line between reality and supernatural forces becomes dangerously blurred. The play opens on a battlefield where Macbeth, a Scottish general, has just won a crucial victory for King Duncan. He's returning home through a fog-shrouded heath when he encounters 3 strange women, the witches, who greet him with prophecies that will change the course of his life. They hail him as Thane of Glamis, which he already is, then as Thane of Cawdor, which he is not, and finally as King hereafter. Before Macbeth can fully process these strange pronouncements, a messenger arrives with news that King Duncan has indeed named him Thane of Cawdor as a reward for his battlefield valor. Suddenly, 2 of the 3 prophecies have come true, and the seed of the third, that he shall be king, begins to take root in his mind like a poisonous plant. Lady Macbeth receives word of the prophecies in a letter from her husband, and she immediately sees the opportunity that her more hesitant spouse might let slip away. When Duncan announces he will spend the night at their castle, she begins to weave a plan as dark as the Scottish moors. "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts," she whispers to the shadows. "Unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty." The night of Duncan's visit unfolds like a nightmare given form. Macbeth sees a floating dagger leading him toward the king's chamber, its blade pointing the way to murder. "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand?" he asks the darkness, unsure whether the weapon is real or a manifestation of his guilty conscience. The castle seems to hold its breath as he moves through corridors that feel suddenly unfamiliar, transformed by his terrible intent. After the deed is done, Macbeth emerges from the king's chamber with blood on his hands and terror in his eyes. He has heard a voice crying, "Sleep no more." Macbeth does murder sleep. and indeed, peaceful rest will elude him for the remainder of his shortened life. Lady Macbeth, initially the stronger of the two, tries to calm his fears, but even she cannot foresee how this single act of treachery will multiply like ripples on a dark pond. Once crowned, Macbeth finds that murder has not satisfied his ambition, but only fed it. Remembering the witch's prophecy that Banquo's sons, not his own, will inherit the throne, he arranges for his friend's assassination. But Banquo's ghost appears at the royal feast, visible only to Macbeth, who speaks to the bloody spectre while his terrified guests look on. The man who sought to secure his position through violence finds himself increasingly isolated, haunted by the consequences of his choices. As the play progresses, we watch both Macbeth and his wife descend into madness, though their paths differ like two streams flowing from the same poisoned source. Lady Macbeth, who once seemed so resolute, begins sleepwalking through the castle, trying to wash imaginary bloodstains from her hands. "Out, damned spot," she cries in her sleep, reliving the night of Duncan's murder over and over again. The woman who once called on spirits to fill her with cruelty now cannot escape the human conscience she tried so hard to suppress. Meanwhile, Macbeth becomes increasingly reckless, returning to the witches for more prophecies to guide his actions. They tell him he cannot be harmed by anyone of woman born, and that he will never be defeated until Birnam Wood comes to his castle at Dunsinane. These predictions give him a false sense of security, for he cannot imagine how such impossible conditions might be fulfilled. But Shakespeare, master of irony, shows us how prophecies can be both true and misleading. When an English army approaches Macbeth's stronghold, they camouflage themselves with branches from Birnam Wood, making it appear that the forest itself is marching toward the castle. And Macbeth's final opponent, Macduff, reveals that he was, from his mother's womb, untimely ripped, technically not born of woman in the conventional sense. The play ends with Macbeth's death and the restoration of rightful order under Malcolm Duncan's son. But the cost has been enormous. Scotland lies wounded, its natural harmony disrupted by a man who sought to force fate rather than accept his place within it. The tragedy of Macbeth is not just personal, but cosmic, showing how individual ambition can disturb the very foundations of the natural world. Let us now step away from the blood-soaked battlefields of Scotland and enter the enchanted realm of A Midsummer Night's Dream, where Shakespeare shows us his gift for comedy and magic. This play unfolds on a single midsummer night in and around Athens, where the boundaries between the human world and the realm of fairies become as thin as gossamer. The story begins with a familiar conflict. Hermia is in love with Lysander, but her father insists she marry Demetrius, whom she cannot love. Under Athenian law, she must obey her father or face severe punishment. So Hermia and Lysander decide to flee into the forest beyond the city, where they can be married according to their heart's desire rather than societal demands. But love, as Shakespeare delights in showing us, is rarely straightforward. Demetrius pursues the fleeing couple, and he in turn is followed by Helena, who loves him desperately despite his indifference. Helena had once been Demetrius's beloved, but his affections shifted to Hermia, leaving Helena to wonder what she lacks that her former lover now finds in another. As these four young Athenians chase each other through the moonlit woods, they unknowingly enter the domain of the fairy kingdom, ruled by Oberon and Titania, the king and queen of the fairies. These immortal beings are engaged in their own romantic dispute. Titania has adopted a changeling child, and Oberon wants the boy for his own attendant, but Titania refuses to give him up. Oberon's solution involves a magical flower whose juice, when dropped on sleeping eyelids, causes the sleeper to fall madly in love with the first creature they see upon waking. He instructs his mischievous servant Puck to apply this love potion to Titania's eyes, hoping she will become infatuated with some ridiculous forest creature and forget about the changeling child in her embarrassment. Puck, also called Robin Goodfellow, is one of Shakespeare's most delightful creations. He is the embodiment of mischief itself, a sprite who delights in practical jokes and confusion. When Oberon also asks him to help the human lovers by applying the potion to Demetrius's eyes so he will love Helena, Puck eagerly agrees. But fairies, it seems, are not always precise in their interventions in human affairs. Through a series of comic mistakes, Puck applies the love potion to the wrong Athenian eyes, creating a tangle of misdirected affections that grows more complex with each magical intervention. At one point, both Lysander and Demetrius are desperately pursuing Helena, who cannot believe their sudden devotion and assumes they are mocking her. Poor Hermia, meanwhile, finds herself abandoned by everyone, unable to understand why her devoted Lysander now seems to despise her. The comedy reaches its peak when Puck encounters a group of Athenian craftsmen rehearsing a play in the forest. These are simple, well-meaning men preparing to perform at the Duke's wedding, and their earnest attempts at dramatic art provide some of the play's most charming moments. Bottom the Weaver, their most enthusiastic, if not most talented member, volunteers to play every role in their tragedy of Pyramus and Thisbe. Puck cannot resist playing a trick on these mortals. He transforms Bottom's head into that of a donkey, sending his fellow actors fleeing in terror. But Bottom, unaware of his transformation, cannot understand their reaction. When Titania awakens and sees him, the love potion causes her to fall instantly and completely in love with this ass-headed mortal. The sight of the fairy queen lavishing affection on Bottom while he remains obliviously human in his responses creates some of the most whimsical scenes in all of Shakespeare. Titania orders her fairy attendants to bring Bottom honey and to fan him with butterfly wings, while he requests hay and asks to have his head scratched. The contrast between her ethereal devotion and his earthbound needs is both hilarious and strangely touching. As dawn approaches, Oberon takes pity on his queen and releases her from the spell. Titania awakens horrified by her recent infatuation, and in her embarrassment, she agrees to give Oberon the changeling child. The Fairy King then sets about untangling the mess Puck has made of the human lovers, applying antidotes and corrections until each person loves the right partner. When morning light filters through the forest, the Duke of Athens and his hunting party discover the four young lovers sleeping peacefully on the moss. Their conflicts resolved by fairy magic, Hermia and Lysander are free to marry, as are Demetrius and Helena, who have found their way back to their original affection for each other. The Duke, moved by their obvious happiness, overrules Hermia's father and declares that all three couples, including himself and Hippolyta, will be wed together. The play concludes with the craftsmen's performance of their tragedy, which proves so unintentionally comic that it provides perfect entertainment for the wedding festivities. Bottom, restored to his human form, but retaining dim memories of his magical experience, delivers some of Shakespeare's most beautiful lines about the nature of dreams and the thin boundary between sleeping and waking consciousness. As the mortals retire to their beds, the fairies return to bless the palace and its inhabitants. Puck speaks the play's final lines directly to the audience, suggesting that if the play has seemed strange or inconsequential, we might consider it all a Midsummer Night's Dream, nothing more substantial than the visions that visit us in sleep. This gentle invitation to dismiss the play as mere fantasy is, of course, Shakespeare's way of making it more real, not less. For dreams, as he knew, often contain truths that our waking minds struggle to accept, and the magic of theater lies in its ability to make the impossible seem not only possible, but inevitable. From the moonlit forests of Athens, let us venture into the tempestuous world of King Lear, a play that stands as perhaps Shakespeare's most unforgiving examination of age, power, and the bonds between parents and children. This is a story that unfolds like a gathering storm, building slowly before unleashing forces that will reshape everything in their path. The play begins with an old king's fateful decision to divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters based on their public declarations of love for him. It seems, at first, like a simple enough request. Goneril and Regan, the 2 elder daughters, offer flowery speeches filled with superlatives about their boundless devotion. But Cordelia, the youngest and most beloved, refuses to participate in this ceremony of flattery. "Nothing, my lord," she says when asked what she can say to earn a richer portion than her sisters. She loves her father, according to my bond, no more nor less, and she will not cheapen that genuine affection with exaggerated praise. This honesty, which should be treasured, instead provokes Lear's terrible rage. In a moment that will echo throughout the tragedy, he banishes Cordelia from his sight and divides her portion between her sisters. Parallel to this main plot runs the story of Gloucester and his 2 sons. Edgar is legitimate and beloved, while Edmund is illegitimate and resentful. But Edmund possesses a sharp intelligence and an understanding of human weakness that he uses to orchestrate his brother's downfall. Through forged letters and careful manipulation, he convinces his father that Edgar plots against his life, forcing the innocent son to flee and live as a mad beggar named Poor Tom. As both plots unfold, we watch fathers make terrible misjudgments about their children, choosing appearance over substance, flattery over truth. Lear quickly discovers that Goneril and Regan's professed love was merely calculated performance. Once they have power, they begin to strip away his retinue, his dignity, and even basic shelter. The man who once commanded absolute obedience finds himself wandering homeless in a fierce storm, accompanied only by his fool and the disguised Kent, a loyal earl who serves his master even after being banished for defending Cordelia. The storm that rages across the heath in the play's central acts becomes more than weather. It mirrors the chaos that Lear's abdication has unleashed, the disorder that follows when natural bonds are severed and traditional hierarchies collapse. As rain pelts down and thunder crashes overhead, the old king rages against the elements, calling on them to destroy a world that has become unrecognizable to him. But it is in this storm that Lear begins to understand truths that his royal comfort had hidden from him. For the first time, he thinks of poor naked wretches who have no shelter from such tempests, and he recognizes his failure to care for the most vulnerable in his kingdom. Poor naked wretches, wheresoe'er you are, that bide the pelting of this pitiless storm, how shall your houseless heads and unfed sides, your looped and windowed raggedness defend you from seasons such as these? His suffering teaches him compassion, though the lesson comes terribly late. Meanwhile, Edmund continues his rise through deception and manipulation. He seduces both Goneril and Regan, playing them against each other while positioning himself to inherit power from multiple sources. His soliloquies reveal a brilliant but amoral mind, one that sees conventional morality as mere superstition. "Thou, nature, art my goddess," he declares, rejecting the social conventions that label him a bastard in favor of a philosophy that celebrates cunning and strength. The play's climax brings together all these threads of deception, madness, and misplaced loyalty in a series of revelations and violent confrontations. Edgar, still disguised as poor Tom, finally reveals himself to his father Gloucester, who has been blinded by Cornwall and Regan in one of Shakespeare's most brutal scenes. The shock of learning that he wronged his good son while trusting his evil one proves too much for the old man's heart. Goneril poisons Regan and then kills herself when her treachery is exposed. Edmund, mortally wounded in combat with Edgar, experiences a moment of conscience and tries to save Cordelia, whom he has ordered executed. But his repentance comes too late. When Lear enters carrying Cordelia's lifeless body, the stage fills with a silence more powerful than any of the storm's fury. The play ends not with restoration, but with exhaustion. The survivors, Kent, Edgar, and Albany, survey a kingdom littered with corpses and wonder how to rebuild from such devastation. There is no sense of justice triumphant, only the weary recognition that some mistakes cannot be undone and some losses cannot be recovered. Lear dies of grief over Cordelia's body, and we are left with young people inheriting a wounded world. King Lear offers no easy comfort, no suggestion that suffering necessarily leads to wisdom, or that good intentions can overcome the consequences of poor judgment. It is Shakespeare at his most unflinching, showing us characters who must live with the results of their choices, even when those results prove catastrophic. From this bleak landscape, let us seek refuge in the gentler world of As You Like It, a pastoral comedy that offers healing through exile and discovery through disguise. The play begins in a court corrupted by usurpation, where Duke Senior has been overthrown by his younger brother, Duke Frederick. But rather than dwelling in this political darkness, Shakespeare quickly moves his characters into the Forest of Arden, a green world where different rules apply and transformation becomes possible. Rosalind, Duke Senior's daughter, has been allowed to remain at court as a companion to her cousin Celia, Duke Frederick's daughter. But when Rosalind falls in love with Orlando, a young man who has been mistreated by his own elder brother, Duke Frederick suddenly sees her as a threat and banishes her from his domain. Celia chooses to accompany her cousin into exile, and together they set out for the Forest of Arden, where Rosalind's father holds court among the trees. For safety during their journey, Rosalind disguises herself as a young man named Ganymede, while Celia becomes the country girl Aliena. This gender disguise will become the engine of the play's romantic comedy, as Rosalind in her male costume encounters Orlando in the forest and offers to cure him of his lovesickness by pretending to be Rosalind herself. The forest proves to be a place where the artificial constraints of court life dissolve. Duke Senior and his followers live simply, finding sermons in stones, books in the running brooks, and good in everything. They hunt for food, sleep under the stars, and discover that exile from corrupt society can become a doorway to authentic living. Orlando, who has also fled to the forest to escape his brother's murderous jealousy, spends his time carving love poems to Rosalind on tree trunks and hanging them from branches like paper fruit. His verses are earnest but amateur, prompting the disguised Rosalind to tease him about his poetic abilities, while secretly delighting in this proof of his devotion. The disguise allows Rosalind to explore her relationship with Orlando from a position of safety and control. As Ganymede, she can test his constancy, educate him about women's nature, and even stage mock marriage ceremonies, all while remaining hidden behind her masculine costume. She discovers that she enjoys this freedom to speak boldly and move through the world without the restrictions that normally constrain women in her society. Other romantic entanglements bloom throughout the forest like wildflowers. The melancholy Jacques, one of Duke Senior's followers, provides philosophical commentary on the folly of love while remaining immune to it himself. His famous speech about the 7 ages of man, from the infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms to second childishness and mere oblivion, offers a cynical but not unkind perspective on human life's inevitable progression. Touchstone, the court fool who has followed the ladies into exile, courts Audrey, a simple country girl whose lack of sophistication both attracts and exasperates him. Their relationship provides comic relief while also suggesting that love can bridge different social classes and educational levels. Most surprisingly, Oliver, Orlando's cruel elder brother, undergoes a complete transformation when he enters the forest. After Orlando saves him from a lioness, risking his own life for the brother who has wronged him, Oliver experiences a sudden conversion to goodness. He falls in love with the disguised Celia at first sight, and she with him, proving that the forest's magic can work even on the most unlikely subjects. As these various love stories approach their climaxes, Rosalind finds herself in an increasingly complex web of her own making. Orlando believes he is in love with the absent Rosalind while being courted by the present Ganymede. Phoebe, a scornful shepherdess, has fallen in love with Ganymede while rejecting the devoted Silvius who adores her. Even the disguised Celia has complicated matters by accepting Oliver's proposal while still pretending to be Aliena. The play's resolution requires Rosalind to abandon her disguise and appear as herself, which she does with theatrical flair, presenting herself to Orlando as if by magic, while simultaneously resolving all the other romantic tangles. The god Hymen appears to bless 4 marriages: Rosalind and Orlando, Celia and Oliver, Phoebe and Silvius, and Touchstone and Audrey. Duke Frederick, we learn, has experienced his own forest transformation, meeting an old religious man who converted him to a life of contemplation. He restores his brother's dukedom and retires from worldly concerns, allowing the exiled court to return to civilization, enriched by their woodland experience. But before they leave the forest, Duke Senior's company enjoys a final celebration with music and dancing under the green canopy. There is a sense that while they will return to their former lives, they carry with them the wisdom and freedom they discovered in exile. The forest has not only provided refuge, but transformation, allowing each character to discover truths about themselves that court life had obscured. As You Like It suggests that sometimes we must lose ourselves to find ourselves, that the apparent catastrophe of exile can become the gift of self-discovery. In the forest, away from the artificial hierarchies and expectations of civilized society, the characters learn to see clearly both themselves and others. Love flourishes not because it is forced or arranged, but because it is freely chosen by hearts that have learned their own desires. The play's title, As You Like It, extends this invitation to the audience. Shakespeare offers us a world where love conquers obstacles, where brothers reconcile, where tyrants repent, and where young people marry their heart's desires. We can accept this optimistic vision or view it with skepticism as we like it. The pastoral comedy provides a gentle alternative to the harsh realities of tragedies like King Lear, suggesting that while the world contains cruelty and injustice, It also holds spaces where healing and happiness remain possible. Now, let us turn to one of Shakespeare's most psychologically complex plays, Othello, where love and jealousy dance a deadly waltz that ends in tragedy. This is a story of manipulation so skillful and malevolent that it continues to disturb audiences centuries after it was written, showing how quickly trust can be poisoned and how devastating the consequences can be when appearance is mistaken for reality. The play opens in Venice, a cosmopolitan city where Othello, a Moorish general, has secretly married Desdemona, a young Venetian woman of noble family. Their love story begins before the play does, told in flashbacks and recollections. Desdemona was drawn to Othello's tales of adventure and exotic travels, while he was moved by her compassionate response to his stories of slavery and warfare. She loved me for the dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. He explains to the Venetian Senate when accused of using witchcraft to win her affections. But their happiness is shadowed from the beginning by Iago, Othello's ensign, whose motivations for evil remain tantalizingly unclear even as his methods prove devastatingly effective. Iago claims to be angry that Othello promoted Cassio over him, but his hatred seems to run deeper than professional disappointment. He speaks of suspecting Othello of adultery with his wife Emilia, though he admits he knows not if this is true. Perhaps most unsettling of all, he suggests that he hates Othello simply for his goodness, his nobility of character that makes Iago's own moral emptiness more apparent. The genius of Iago lies in his understanding of human psychology and his ability to exploit the insecurities of others. He presents himself as honest and trustworthy, while weaving elaborate deceptions that seem to confirm his victims' worst fears about themselves and those they love. He is a master of suggestion, rarely making direct accusations, but instead planting seeds of doubt that grow in the minds of others until they bear poisonous fruit. When the play moves from Venice to Cyprus, where Othello has been sent to defend the island against Turkish invasion, Iago begins his campaign of destruction in earnest. He starts by engineering Cassio's disgrace, getting the young lieutenant drunk, and provoking him into a fight that leads to his dismissal from service. This provides Iago with the opening he needs to approach Desdemona, knowing she will naturally want to help restore her husband's former friend to favor. Desdemona's advocacy for Cassio, innocent and well-intentioned as it is, becomes the foundation for Iago's masterpiece of manipulation. He begins to suggest to Othello that his wife's concern for Cassio might indicate something more than friendship, dropping hints so subtle that Othello initially dismisses them. But Iago is patient, and he understands that the most effective lies are those that contain just enough truth to seem plausible. As Iago's poison begins to work, we watch Othello transform from a confident, noble leader into a man consumed by jealous suspicion. The change is gradual at first, then accelerating like a boulder rolling down a mountain. Shakespeare shows us how jealousy operates, not as a sudden burst of anger, but as a creeping disease that infects every thought and perception until nothing can be seen clearly anymore. The famous handkerchief, Othello's first gift to Desdemona, becomes the physical evidence that seems to confirm Iago's suggestions. When Desdemona drops it and Emilia picks it up, Iago uses this innocent piece of fabric as proof of his wife's infidelity. He plants it in Cassio's room Othello to see, and then arranges for Cassio with it, creating a tableau that appears to validate every suspicion he has planted. What makes this manipulation so effective is that it plays upon real insecurities. Othello is an outsider in Venetian society, different in race, culture, and background from his wife and her community. Despite his military success and noble character, he harbors doubts about his worthiness and his ability to hold Desdemona's love. Iago intuitively understands these vulnerabilities and exploits them with surgical precision. The tragedy accelerates as Othello's jealousy overwhelms his reason and his love. The man who once spoke so eloquently of his affection for Desdemona now sees her every gesture as confirmation of her betrayal. When she pleads for Cassio's restoration, he hears manipulation. When she shows concern for his changed behavior, he interprets it as guilt. The very qualities that first attracted him to her, her compassion and loyalty to friends, now seem like evidence of her faithlessness. The climax arrives in the bedroom where Desdemona sleeps, unaware that her husband has come to kill her. Even in his rage, Othello maintains a twisted sense of justice, believing he must punish her sins to prevent her from betraying other men. The scene is almost unbearably tense as Desdemona awakens to find death hovering over her, still not understanding what she has supposedly done to deserve such treatment. After he has smothered her, the truth begins to emerge through a series of revelations that come too late to save anyone. Emilia discovers her husband's role in the tragedy and courageously exposes his lies, even knowing it will cost her life. Othello learns that Desdemona was innocent, that the handkerchief evidence was fabricated, that his noble wife died for crimes she never committed. In his final speech, Othello attempts to make sense of what he has done, asking to be remembered as one who loved not wisely, but too well. He recognizes that he has been manipulated, but he also accepts responsibility for his actions. The tragedy of Othello is not just that a good man was deceived, but that his love, when corrupted by jealousy, became more destructive than hatred. The play leaves us with profound questions about the nature of trust, the power of suggestion, and the thin line between love and possession. Iago's motiveless malignity suggests that evil sometimes needs no elaborate justification, that some people destroy simply because they can. Yet the tragedy also shows how our own insecurities and fears can make us complicit in our destruction, how the very love that should protect us can, when twisted, become the weapon that destroys us. From this intimate domestic tragedy, let us journey to ancient Egypt, where Antony and Cleopatra unfolds on a canvas as vast as the Roman Empire itself. This is Shakespeare's most expansive tragedy, moving between Rome and Egypt, between duty and pleasure, between the political and the personal in ways that blur all boundaries. Mark Antony is one of three men who rule the Roman world, a triumvir whose decisions shape the fate of nations. But when we first encounter him in Alexandria, he seems to have forgotten his imperial responsibilities entirely. He lies in Cleopatra's arms, lost in a love affair that has captivated him so completely that messengers from Rome wait unheeded in his antechamber. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, is perhaps Shakespeare's most complex female character, a woman who embodies both the ancient mysteries of her kingdom and the political cunning necessary to survive in a world dominated by Roman power. She is by turns playful and imperious, vulnerable and calculating, a lover who understands that her personal relationships are also matters of state survival. Their first scene together establishes the intoxicating atmosphere that surrounds their relationship. When Antony suggests they should hear what news has come from Rome, Cleopatra teases him, asking if perhaps his wife Fulvia is angry, or if young Octavius Caesar has sent commands. She transforms duty into a game, making responsibility seem small and petty compared to the pleasures of the moment. But Rome will not be ignored forever. Word arrives that Fulvia has died and that Pompey threatens the empire's stability. Antony realizes he must return to his political obligations, leaving behind the golden world of Egypt for the marble halls of Roman duty. The contrast between these two civilizations runs throughout the play like a river dividing two different approaches to life itself. Egypt, as Shakespeare presents it, is a land of abundance and sensuality, where time moves slowly and pleasure is not merely permitted, but celebrated. The Nile's fertility creates a landscape of plenty, and Cleopatra's court reflects this richness in its music, feasts, and elaborate ceremonies. Here, imagination flourishes, and love is treated as an art form worthy of the greatest minds and hearts. Rome, by contrast, operates according to principles of order, discipline, and imperial ambition. It is a world of marble columns and military formations, where personal desires must be subordinated to the greater good of the empire. Octavius Caesar embodies these Roman virtues, young and cold, and absolutely dedicated to political success. He views Antony's Egyptian dalliance not as a love story, but as a dereliction of duty that threatens the stability they have built together. When Antony returns to Rome, he attempts to reconcile his two worlds by marrying Octavia, Caesar's sister. This political marriage is designed to cement the alliance between the triumvirs, but it places Antony in an impossible position. He genuinely tries to be a Roman husband and leader, but his heart remains beside the Nile. Octavia is virtuous and dutiful, everything a Roman wife should be, but she cannot compete with the memory of Cleopatra's infinite variety. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, Cleopatra rages and mourns by turns, sending messengers to discover every detail of Antony's new life. When she learns that Octavia is low-voiced and short of stature, she takes comfort in imagining that such a woman cannot hold Antony's interest for long. Her jealousy is magnificent in its intensity, transforming her into a force of nature rather than merely a woman scorned. The political situation deteriorates as Pompey's rebellion grows stronger and the triumvirate begins to fracture. Antony finds himself caught between his Roman obligations and his Egyptian desires, unable to fully embrace either world. When he finally returns to Cleopatra, abandoning his wife and his political alliance, the die is cast for the tragedy that must follow. Caesar views Antony's return to Egypt as both personal betrayal and political threat. The empire cannot be governed by a man who puts private passion above public duty, and war becomes inevitable. The conflict that follows will be fought not just between armies, but between two different philosophies of life, two ways of understanding what makes existence meaningful. The sea battle at Actium becomes the turning point of both the political and personal drama. Antony commands a vast fleet, but at the crucial moment, Cleopatra's ships retreat from the battle, and Antony follows her, abandoning his forces in the heat of combat. This single decision destroys his military reputation and ensures Caesar's victory, but it also represents his final choice between Roman honor and Egyptian love. Back in Alexandria, the consequences of that choice begin to unfold like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Antony's followers abandon him, his allies defect to Caesar, and his empire crumbles around him. Yet, in these moments of political collapse, his love for Cleopatra burns brighter than ever, as if defeat has purified it of all practical considerations. Cleopatra, facing the prospect of being led through Rome in Caesar's triumph as a captive queen, begins to contemplate death as the only honorable escape. But even in planning her suicide, she maintains her theatrical magnificence, determined to die in a manner worthy of her royal status and her great love affair. The play's final acts unfold with the inexorable logic of tragedy, yet Shakespeare fills them with moments of transcendent beauty. When Antony, believing Cleopatra has already died, falls on his sword, he discovers too late that she still lives. The scene of his death in her monument, hoisted up to her in his final moments, becomes a grotesque parody of their earlier romantic encounters. Love and death intertwined in ways that are both heartbreaking and sublime. Cleopatra's own death scene ranks among Shakespeare's greatest theatrical moments. She prepares for suicide as if for a wedding, adorning herself in her finest robes and crown. When the asp is brought to her, hidden in a basket of figs, she speaks to it almost tenderly, calling it "my baby at my breast that sucks the nurse asleep." Her death becomes a kind of triumph, a refusal to be diminished by political defeat. Caesar arrives to find both lovers dead, and even he, the embodiment of Roman pragmatism, acknowledges the grandeur of what he has witnessed. She looks like sleep, as she would catch another Antony in her strong toil of grace, he observes, recognizing that their love story has achieved a kind of immortality that his political victory cannot match. The tragedy of Antony and Cleopatra lies not in the destruction of innocence, as in Romeo and Juliet, or in the corruption of nobility, as in Macbeth, but in the impossible conflict between public duty and private desire. Both lovers are magnificent in their passions and flawed in their judgment, creating a tragedy that is simultaneously personal and political, intimate and epic. Shakespeare presents their love as something that transcends ordinary human experience, a force so powerful that it reshapes the very nature of those it touches. Yet he also shows the real-world consequences of such transcendence, the way that private choices can have public ramifications, the way that personal fulfillment can come at the cost of political responsibility. The play suggests that some loves are too large for the world to contain, that the very qualities that make them magnificent also make them destructive. Antony and Cleopatra achieve a kind of immortality through their story, but it is the immortality of art rather than life, preserved in memory and imagination rather than in the continuing flow of political events. From the ancient Mediterranean, let us travel to the mysterious island where the tempest unfolds, Shakespeare's final complete play, and perhaps his most magical. This is a story of power and forgiveness, of art and nature, of the relationship between civilization and wildness that speaks to something deep in the human imagination. The play begins with a shipwreck, but not an ordinary one. The storm that drives a ship full of nobles onto an unknown shore has been raised by magic, conjured by Prospero, the rightful Duke of Milan, who lives in exile on this enchanted island with his daughter Miranda. 12 years before, Prospero's brother Antonio, with the help of Alonso, king of Naples, had usurped his dukedom and set him and his infant daughter adrift on the sea. But Prospero is no ordinary exile. In his years of banishment, he has devoted himself to the study of magic, learning to command spirits and control the elements themselves. The storm that opens the play is his revenge, bringing his enemies to the island where he can confront them on his own terms. Yet, this is not a simple story of vengeance, for Prospero's magic gives him powers that raise questions about the nature of justice and the proper use of power. Miranda, now grown to young womanhood, has never seen any human beings other than her father and Caliban, the island's original inhabitant, whom Prospero has enslaved. When she witnesses the shipwreck, her compassion is immediately aroused, and she begs her father to calm the storm if he has the power to do so. Her innocence and natural goodness provide a moral center for the play, a reminder of what humanity can be when uncorrupted by political ambition or the desire for revenge. Caliban is one of Shakespeare's most complex creations, a being who exists somewhere between human and monster, civilized and wild. Prospero found him living alone on the island and initially treated him with kindness, teaching him language and attempting to educate him. But their relationship soured when Caliban tried to assault Miranda, and now he serves as Prospero's reluctant slave, cursing his master while being compelled to obey him. The relationship between Prospero and Caliban has been read many ways over the centuries, sometimes as a meditation on colonialism, sometimes as an exploration of the tension between nature and nurture. Caliban speaks some of the play's most beautiful poetry about the island, describing its sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt. Not, yet, he also represents the primitive forces that civilization seeks to control and transform. Ariel, Prospero's other servant, is pure spirit, capable of invisibility and transformation, able to control the elements and create illusions. Unlike Caliban, Ariel serves willingly, bound by gratitude because Prospero freed him from imprisonment in a tree where the witch Sycorax had trapped him before her death. Ariel represents the power of art and imagination, the ability to transform reality through creative vision. The shipwrecked nobles are separated by the storm and wander the island in different groups, each experiencing their own version of Prospero's magic. Ferdinand, Alonso's son and heir, encounters Miranda, and they fall instantly in love, creating a pure and innocent romance that contrasts with the political machinations of their elders. Their love story unfolds with fairy tale simplicity, yet it serves important dramatic functions, representing the possibility of renewal and reconciliation between the warring families. Meanwhile, Antonio and Sebastian, the king's brother, plot to murder Alonso and Gonzalo while they sleep, repeating the pattern of betrayal that brought them all to the island. Their conspiracy is thwarted by Ariel, who awakens the intended victims, but the incident reveals how little the conspirators have learned from their experiences. Stefano and Tranquillo, a butler and a jester from the wrecked ship, provide comic relief, while also exploring themes of power and servitude. When they encounter Caliban, he mistakes Stefano for a god because of the wine he carries, and proposes that they murder Prospero and take control of the island. Their drunken plot parodies the more serious political conspiracies, showing how the desire for power can corrupt even the lowliest individuals. As the play progresses, Prospero uses his magic to create increasingly elaborate illusions and tests for his enemies. He conjures a banquet that vanishes when they try to eat, accompanied by Ariel in the form of a harpy who accuses them of their crimes against Prospero and Miranda. The psychological pressure of these supernatural experiences begins to work on the consciences of some of the nobles, particularly Alonso, who believes his son Ferdinand has drowned and begins to feel remorse for his past actions. The climax comes when Prospero has all his enemies in his power, helpless and confused by his magic. At this moment of triumph, when revenge is finally within his grasp, he makes a choice that defines the play's ultimate meaning. Instead of destroying those who wronged him, he chooses forgiveness, recognizing that mercy is nobler than vengeance, and that hatred ultimately destroys the one who harbors it as much as its intended target. The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance, Prospero declares, and with these words he begins the process of reconciliation that will restore harmony to all the relationships that have been broken by ambition and betrayal. He reveals Ferdinand alive and well, reuniting him with his father, and blessing his engagement to Miranda. He forgives his brother Antonio and Alonso, restoring the political alliances that his magic has made possible. Most significantly, Prospero renounces his magic, breaking his staff and drowning his book of spells. This renunciation has often been read as Shakespeare's own farewell to the theater, since The Tempest was likely his final play written without collaboration. The speech in which Prospero describes his magical powers, "These our revels now are ended," contains some of the most haunting poetry about the relationship between art and reality, suggesting that all human achievements are ultimately as insubstantial as dreams. The play ends with restoration and reconciliation, but also with profound questions about the nature of power, civilization, and human nature itself. Prospero's magic has allowed him to control events and transform his enemies, but it has also isolated him from ordinary human experience. His decision to abandon supernatural power and return to the world of normal political relationships represents a choice to embrace humanity with all its limitations and possibilities. Caliban's final words express a desire to seek for grace, suggesting that even the most primitive aspects of human nature can be touched by the possibility of redemption. Yet the play leaves ambiguous what his future will hold, just as it leaves uncertain whether the political reconciliations achieved through magic will prove lasting in the ordinary world. The Tempest offers Shakespeare's most complete vision of the relationship between art and life, showing how imaginative power can transform reality while also acknowledging the ultimate primacy of human relationships and moral choices. The magic that drives the plot serves as a metaphor for the power of theater itself, the ability of dramatic art to create alternate realities that illuminate truths about our own world. As Prospero prepares to leave the island and return to Milan, he asks the audience to release him through their applause, acknowledging the collaborative nature of theatrical magic. The play cannot exist without the willing participation of viewers who agree to believe in its illusions, just as Prospero's magic cannot achieve lasting transformation without the moral choices of those it touches. The island itself becomes a character in the play, a space between civilization and wilderness where transformation becomes possible. It is neither the corrupt court of Milan nor the primitive state of nature, but something in between, a place where the normal rules are suspended and new possibilities can emerge. When the characters leave at the play's end, they carry with them whatever wisdom they have gained from their experience of this liminal space. Now, as we near the end of our gentle journey through Shakespeare's world, let us pause to consider what makes his works continue to speak to us across the centuries. Perhaps it is his unparalleled ability to capture the full range of human emotion, from the tender love of Romeo and Juliet to the consuming ambition of Macbeth, from the comic confusion of the lovers in A Midsummer Night's Dream to the tragic dignity of King Lear. Or perhaps it is his mastery of language itself, his ability to find exactly the right words to express thoughts and feelings that we recognize as true even when we could never have articulated them ourselves. His characters speak in ways that reveal not only their own natures, but something essential about the human condition, using poetry to illuminate psychology and rhythm to reveal the heartbeat of emotion. Shakespeare understood that human beings are complex creatures, capable of both nobility and baseness, often within the same breath. His heroes have flaws, his villains have motivations, and his comic characters have depths that surprise us when we look closely. He refused to simplify human nature, instead presenting it in all its contradictory glory, showing us characters who feel real because they are as complicated and inconsistent as we are ourselves. His plays also possess a timeless quality that allows each generation to find new meanings in them. The political intrigue of Julius Caesar speaks to any age concerned with the balance between individual ambition and collective good. The domestic violence of Othello remains horrifyingly relevant in our contemporary discussions of trust and manipulation. The environmental themes of The Tempest resonate with modern concerns about humanity's relationship with nature. Yet for all their intellectual complexity and thematic richness, Shakespeare's plays never lose sight of their primary purpose as entertainment. They were written for audiences who came to the theater seeking diversion from their daily troubles, and they succeed brilliantly at providing that escape, while also offering deeper rewards for those who seek them. The language itself has a musical quality that works on us even when we don't fully understand every reference or allusion. The rhythm of iambic pentameter mirrors the human heartbeat, creating a natural flow that carries us along with the story. The imagery creates pictures in our minds that linger long after the words have faded, and the metaphors illuminate familiar experiences in startling new ways. Tonight, as we prepare to let sleep carry us away from Shakespeare's world, we might reflect on how these 400-year-old stories continue to offer comfort and insight to modern readers and viewers. In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, there is something reassuring about encountering characters who face similar struggles and somehow find ways to endure, to love, to forgive, and to hope. Perhaps most remarkably, Shakespeare's understanding of sleep and dreams permeates his work in ways that feel almost prophetic for those of us seeking rest through his words. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, he explores how the boundaries between sleeping and waking consciousness blur, how our dreaming minds process the complexities of love and desire in ways our rational selves cannot. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, Prospero tells us in The Tempest, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. This recognition of sleep as both refuge and revelation runs through many of his plays like a gentle current. Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene shows us how the unconscious mind processes guilt and trauma, while Hamlet's famous soliloquy contemplates sleep as the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. Even in his comedies, characters often awaken transformed, as if sleep itself has been a kind of magic working upon them. The sonnets, those 14-line jewels of compressed emotion and observation, offer us perhaps Shakespeare's most intimate voice. Here we find him speaking directly to us across the centuries, meditating on love, beauty, time, and mortality with a directness that can take the breath away. Sonnet 18, which begins, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" transforms a simple compliment into a meditation on how art can preserve beauty against the ravages of time. In Sonnet 73, he writes of autumn's approach with images that are both specific and universal. "That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang." The metaphor moves from autumn to twilight to dying embers, each image reinforcing the others until we feel the weight of approaching winter, both literal and metaphorical. The sonnets often work like small spells, taking a single moment or observation and expanding it until it contains entire worlds of meaning. They demonstrate Shakespeare's ability to find the extraordinary within the ordinary, to see in a lover's glance or a flower's brief blooming some larger truth about the nature of existence itself. Many of the sonnets deal with the passage of time, and the way memory preserves what the physical world cannot. When to the sessions of sweet, silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, begins Sonnet 30, inviting us into that quiet space where we review our lives, counting gains and losses like coins in a purse. The poem acknowledges the pain of remembering what we have lost, but also suggests that this very act of remembrance is a kind of treasure, keeping the past alive within us. The famous Sonnet 116, which begins, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments," offers one of literature's most enduring definitions of love. It presents love not as a fleeting emotion, but as a constant star, something that remains steady even when everything around it changes. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, the poem insists, creating a standard of devotion that has inspired countless couples to include these lines in their wedding ceremonies. Yet the sonnets also acknowledge love's complexities and contradictions. The sequence includes poems to both a fair young man and a mysterious dark lady, exploring different kinds of attraction and attachment. Some sonnets celebrate the beloved's beauty and virtue, while others wrestle with jealousy, betrayal, and the gap between idealization and reality. Together, they create a psychological portrait of the lover's mind in all its shifting moods and preoccupations. The language of the sonnets demonstrates Shakespeare's mastery of form and his ability to make constraint feel like freedom. The 14-line structure, with its intricate rhyme scheme and rhythmic patterns, could easily become a prison for meaning. Instead, Shakespeare uses these formal limitations as a kind of pressure that compresses his thoughts into their most concentrated form. Every word must earn its place. Every image must work multiple jobs, and the result is poetry of extraordinary density and power. Reading the sonnets aloud reveals another layer of their magic. The sounds of the words work together to create music that reinforces their meaning. Consider the opening of Sonnet 12. "When I do count the clock that tells the time and see the brave day sunk in hideous night." The hard consonants of "count the clock" mimic the ticking of time, while the contrast between brave day and hideous night is emphasized by the shift from bright vowels to dark ones. This attention to the sonic qualities of language appears throughout Shakespeare's work, but it feels especially important in the sonnets, where every syllable contributes to the overall effect. The poems are designed to be heard as much as read, to work on our ears and emotions simultaneously. When we encounter them in moments of quiet reflection, they can feel like conversations with a particularly insightful friend, someone who has thought deeply about the experiences we all share. The sonnets also reveal Shakespeare's fascination with the power of poetry itself to transcend time and mortality. Again and again, he promises that his verses will preserve the beloved's beauty long after physical beauty fades. "So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee," concludes Sonnet 18, making the poem itself a kind of immortality machine. This confidence in art's preserving power might seem arrogant, but 4 centuries later, it has proven remarkably accurate. The young man and dark lady of the sonnets remain forever young and mysterious in Shakespeare's verses, their beauty and complexity preserved in amber made of words. We know nothing of their historical identities, yet they feel more real to us than most of our contemporaries, because Shakespeare's language has given them a kind of eternal life. Moving from the intimate world of the sonnets to the broader canvas of the history plays, we find Shakespeare grappling with questions of power, leadership, and national identity that remain urgent today. These plays, which dramatized the reigns of various English kings, offered Elizabethan audiences a way to think about their own political moment by examining the past. They blend historical fact with dramatic invention, creating portraits of rulers who feel both distant and immediate. Richard III presents us with one of literature's most compelling villains, a man who seduces both characters and audience with his wit and charisma, even as he commits increasingly heinous crimes. From his opening soliloquy, where he announces his intention to prove a villain because he cannot be a lover, Richard draws us into his confidence with a combination of self-awareness and shameless ambition that is both appalling and oddly attractive. The play shows us how charisma can mask cruelty, how political skill can serve evil ends, and how a society's institutions can be corrupted by a single determined individual. Yet Richard is never simply a monster. Shakespeare gives him genuine wit, strategic intelligence, and moments of vulnerability that complicate our response to him. When he wakens from nightmares on the eve of his final battle, tormented by the ghosts of those he has murdered, we see him briefly stripped of his public persona, revealed as a man who understands exactly what he has become. Henry V, by contrast, presents the challenges of heroic leadership, exploring what it means to be a good king in a world where kingship requires both inspiration and ruthlessness. The play follows young Prince Hal's transformation from tavern companion to battlefield commander, showing how private relationships must sometimes be sacrificed to public duty. The night before the Battle of Agincourt, Henry walks disguised among his soldiers, listening to their fears and doubts, wrestling with the weight of responsibility that kingship places upon him. The famous St. Crispin's Day speech before the battle demonstrates Shakespeare's ability to write inspiring rhetoric while also examining the psychology behind it. Henry transforms a desperate military situation into aiming his outnumbered troops' opportunity for glory, convinced that their very disadvantage makes them special. "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers," he declares, creating a sense of exclusive fellowship that makes each soldier feel chosen rather than doomed. Yet the play also shows us the costs of such leadership. Henry must reject his old friend Falstaff, the jovial companion of his youth, because their friendship is incompatible with royal dignity. The rejection scene is painful to watch, as we see how public roles can force us to abandon private loyalties. The price of becoming a successful king is the loss of the capacity for ordinary friendship. These history plays often focus on moments of transition, times when the old order is giving way to something new and uncertain. They explore how individuals respond to historical change, how some adapt while others cling to obsolete patterns, how personal choices interact with larger social and political forces beyond any individual's control. The language in these plays often reflects their public, ceremonial nature. Characters speak in formal, elevated registers, appropriate to matters of state. Yet Shakespeare always finds ways to reveal the private emotions beneath the public rhetoric. We hear the loneliness in Richard II's poetic meditations on kingship, the genuine anguish in Henry VI's desire to be a simple shepherd rather than a king, the complex mixture of guilt and determination in Henry IV's reflections on how he came to the throne. What emerges from these historical dramas is a complex picture of power and its effects on those who wield it. Shakespeare shows us that leadership requires difficult choices, that good intentions don't guarantee good outcomes, and that the responsibilities of public office can transform even well-meaning individuals in unexpected ways. These insights remain relevant in any age when we must choose leaders and evaluate their performance. And so we come to the end of our gentle journey through the world of William Shakespeare, having wandered from the battlements of Elsinore to the enchanted forests of Athens, from the passionate streets of Verona to the mysterious island of the Tempest. We've listened to lovers whisper in moonlit gardens, watched kings grapple with the weight of crowns, and witnessed the quiet magic that transforms ordinary language into something eternal. These stories, born 4 centuries ago in a wooden theater beside the Thames, continue to offer us refuge and recognition, showing us that the human heart beats with the same rhythms across all ages and all distances. As you drift towards sleep tonight, let Shakespeare's words settle around you like a familiar blanket, reminding you that in a universe of endless change, some truths remain constant, some beauty endures, and some voices speak across time with such clarity that they feel like whispers meant just for you. Sweet dreams.